With threats to our nation waiting around every corner, adaptability is more important than ever. When conditions change without notice, quick strategic thinking is crucial. And with obstacles consistently impending, determination is essential in overcoming them. It's this willingness, decisiveness, and resilience that sets Marines apart. With our fighting spirit, we don't just fight battles, we win them. Marines are the constant our nation counts on to fight the unknown. And through adaptable problem solving, we do just that. Learn more at marines.com.
Getting engaged is a moment worth cherishing. A one-of-a-kind ring that you design at Blue Nile can help your love sparkle. Just choose your diamond and setting. When you've found the one, you'll get it delivered right to your door. Finding the right engagement ring can be nerve-wracking. At Blue Nile, you'll have the expert guidance needed and a diamond guarantee that ensures you're getting the highest quality at the best price. Cherish all of life's moments and save up to 30% at BlueNile.com. That's BlueNile.com.
It is Ryan here, and I have a question for you. What do you do when you win? Like, are you a fist pumper, a woohooer, a hand clapper, a high fiver? I kind of like the high five, but if you want to hone in on those winning moves, check out Chumba Casino. At ChumbaCasino.com, choose from hundreds of social casino-style games for your chance to redeem serious cash prizes. There are new game releases weekly, plus free daily bonuses. So don't wait. Start having the most fun ever at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
And now, broadcasting live online on your smart speaker and on Facebook Live. It's time for another live podcast. This is Superpod 2020.
Its origins back to 776 BC, when representatives from the kingdoms of ancient Greece came together in Olympia to compete in pentathlon, boxing, wrestling and equestrian events, amongst others. The first modern games were held in Athens in 1896, and it brought together 14 nations, 241 athletes and 43 events. The Paralympics was first held in Rome in 1960. What is now dubbed the greatest show on earth will open in Tokyo, Japan on July 24th, with around 11,000 athletes, more than 200 nations across 33 different sports. I'm John.
And I'm Michael, and we are Anything But Footy. We are your Olympic and Paralympic sport podcast. Each week, we shine a light on those athletes, disciplines and sports that captures the public imagination, usually around once every 4 years, but struggles for coverage outside of games time. Now, you're listening to Superpod 2020. This is the two-day podcast festival raising money for sport relief, and we're broadcasting to you live from the Social in Southampton. Thanks for having us, and it is brilliant. It's great to have this platform to share our expertise and our experience, maybe that one's more suitable, of Olympic and Paralympic sports.
And you can get involved right now. You can email studio@superpod.co.uk. We're also on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter @SuperpodUK2020, or you can use our hashtag Superpod2020 at any time. And if you want to know what Anything But Footy is about, then we're also on Twitter @AnythingButF, on Facebook, Instagram and YouTube. And we do a new episode every week, and we also check out our Great British Bosses Series 2, where we interview the men and women responsible for running sport in this country.
And over the next hour or so, we're going to be looking ahead for you to Tokyo 2020, discussing some of the big issues ahead of the event. For example, will coronavirus cause it to be postponed or even cancelled? And if it does go ahead, will we see records tumbling as athletes take advantage of the new Nike technology and the Vaporfly shoe? Can we trust what we witnessed, or has the issue of doping clouded your view of the whole thing? Plus, we're really looking forward to this. We're going to be joined by two members of the British sailing team. That's Saskia Sills, a world champion windsurfer, and Kirstie Urwin, who's returned from injury to target the Games in Paris in 2024.
Firstly, a bit about us.
Yes.
What right do we have to be talking about the Olympic and Paralympics? So I think the first thing to say is we're just huge fans. Growing up, it may not look it, but 1984 was the first Olympics that I certainly remember growing up and watching Flojo in action and seeing a grainy picture from Los Angeles, the guy with the backpack on his back flying up to light the Olympic flame from 1984. Torval and Dean.
That was my first memory, definitely, of the Olympics. It's the first time I remember watching an Olympic Games, and it was Sarajevo. It would have been January, February 1984, and it was Torvilandine and Bolero. And I think people probably forget now, because the way figure skating has certainly gone down the agenda, just how huge that was. And remember, we're talking about a time where there were only 4 TV channels as well, and that's when you've got upper echelons of 20 million people watching 6 minutes of figure skating, and that was my
I think it was the first time anyone had heard Bolero.
Yeah.
I thought it was good.
Ravel's Bolero, then we all got it in our cassette collection soon after that. That was certainly my first memory, and I think probably between us we've watched more hours of Olympic and Paralympic sport, either on television or live, than is probably humanly possible or indeed healthy. But I think we're both lucky in that, as well, obviously, of our early memories, like most people, is watching it on TV, but we've had the experience of working at some games, and we're both heading obviously to Tokyo, which will be our third games. And we first met really during London 2012, which was just a brilliant summer, and the country was probably its best it's been, certainly in our lifetimes.
I think it showed that Britain can do things, and it can, put on games, and I think we've done it since. We've had all these other work, with Rugby World Cup. If you hear cheers in the background, by the way, it is the rugby downstairs that is getting that reaction. England were winning when we came up. But, we've put on the Rugby World Cup, we've had the World Athletics Championships, and, we've still got more events to come. And I think what London 2012 did is change the way that Britain thinks about itself, and it changed us as well. I met you for the first time, and we were rivals in radio terms.
We were competing against each other for interviews and coverage, but very soon I think realised that it was probably best. I'm wary that our ex-bosses at that time might be listening now. It was probably best to sort of work together than work against each other a little bit. But I feel very lucky when I look back at 2012, because I literally turned up on day one. I know you were covering all the build-up for LBC Radio as it was at the time.
Yeah.
I turned up fresh from covering Leeds against Torquay in a pre-season friendly, which clashed with the opening ceremony. And I tell you what, Leeds and Torquay had nothing on Danny Boyle's opening ceremony, the Neil Warnock Leeds United team. We should say we are football fans, although our podcast is anything but footy.
Yes, we're not anti-football in any way, shape. In fact, I used to do a show on LBC, as previously mentioned, where I used to talk football all afternoon and just talk about goals going in. But we wanted to highlight sports that we think, and we'll meet some athletes later, who, week in, week out, are competing and putting themselves through the pain of what they have to do to try and become gold medalists and medalists, or just even going to the Olympics.
And I think that was really...
But they don't get coverage.
No, and I think that was really formulated in our minds in 2016 when we were both in Rio. And it was very difficult for us because we were in that bubble of being in Rio de Janeiro covering the games. But when we then spoke to people who were at home, or you looked at social media feeds, to realise that they were delaying the news at 10 to show a hockey final, the women's hockey final, and that historic gold medal, to realise the impact that hockey was having that night and all those millions of people watching it. And we were sat there in the stadium enjoying it, but to realise that Hugh Edwards was sat in the news studio back in London waiting for this hockey penalty shootout to finish, we realised, I think, at that point that actually these hockey players, these sports deserve their moment in the sun more often than just once every 4 years.
We'll hopefully talk a bit more about who we've met and who we've interviewed and various things as the show goes on. But we talk about Olympic and Paralympic sport week in, week out, and the big topic at the moment is something that sport is not going to be immune from. What is going on in the world is, shocking. From a sporting point of view, there are lots of question marks. The Olympics and Paralympic Games are not immune to coronavirus, and the discussion about whether the Olympics and Paralympics should be staged or not is the big question. So could or should they be postponed or cancelled?
Well, that's the two questions at the moment. Could the Olympic Games be postponed, and the Paralympic Games as well? Should they be postponed? And what we're seeing at the moment in the world of sport is other events being postponed pretty much on a daily basis at the moment. So you've got football in Italy, Switzerland and Japan. The J-League's been postponed. Rome, of course, is as a host city for Euro 2020, and Italy has been very much, as Europe is concerned, central to this outbreak. So what will happen for Euro 2020? Wembley, of course, is hosting the semi-finals and the finals. You've got Six Nations match postponed. You've got the F1 Grand Prix in China postponed. MotoGP, cycling, the UAE Tour, they had to cancel their final two stages. The Indoor World Championship Athletics, which was slated for China, that's been postponed. And triathlon have had to make postponements as well. So, this is happening a lot. What we've got is an Olympic and a Paralympic Games that's taking place in around about 5 months' time, though.
And I think that's probably the big question, because nothing has been delayed or cancelled at Olympic Games apart from a world war.
Yeah.
But this is a big issue that the IOC need to look at, and they've had a meeting this week, not to do with coronavirus. And Thomas Bach, the IOC president, was very strong to say that they haven't really talked about it. I think they have in some of the back meetings, if you like, but the executive of the IOC met this week, a planned meeting, and they had to come out and say something. They had to show that as an organisation, yes, it's their job to put on the Olympics and the IPC to put on the Paralympics, but they also don't want to deter athletes from training and, to put anybody off from buying tickets or sponsors or anything along those lines.
Yeah, more from us in a moment on coronavirus, but let's set this meeting that the International Olympic Committee have had into a little bit of context. And the global sport correspondent for the Associated Press, who's a man called Rob Harris, was there. He was at this IOC meeting in Lausanne. And to give us a little bit of context, he joins us today from where he's working in Anfield, Liverpool.
Hi, I'm Rob Harris, global sports correspondent at the Associated Press, currently at Anfield, where fans will be wondering just how long they'll be able to come to the stadium to watch Liverpool play as the virus spreads. The impact on sport has already been significant in Europe, of course. Of course, the big looming event is the one that ultimately starts in a way in Europe. It's the lighting of the Olympic torch in Greece, and that is due to take place on March the 19th, a day before the flame arrives in Japan. We've already discovered that 140 children who are due to be sent from Japan to Greece for that ceremony will now not be going. And of course the big question is, will there even be an Olympics starting as planned in July as expected? Well, Olympic organisers, particularly Thomas Bach, to be saying as they are that they are not even contemplating cancellation or postponement does seem to counter the current talk from the medical experts, who at the moment are not even sensing when the virus can be contained. And of course an Olympics involves so many thousands of athletes all mixing around one place, which if the world is trying to control and try to find a way of stopping COVID-19 spreading, it's the worst possible environment. Cancelling Olympics outside wartime would be unprecedented and cost billions in lost revenue.
That's Rob Harris, who is the global sports correspondent for the Associated Press, and as you could quite clearly hear in the background, talking to us there as the teams were coming out at Anfield as Liverpool were playing today. And I think it's probably important at this point to try and correct some of the misinformation that I think we've heard this week about the Olympics and coronavirus. And the Japanese Olympics Minister, Seiko Hashimoto, has said that the contract between Tokyo and the IOC allows for a postponement within 2020. But I think it's key that it's not a Japanese decision. It's not the decision of the organising committee in Tokyo. If this Games is to be postponed or if it's to be cancelled, it is in the IOC's decision. The bid book, you might remember it from when London got the Games, is huge. The contract you have to sign to be a host city to the Olympic Games is massive. And in that book, it's up to the IOC. It's not up to Tokyo.
It's like a franchise. It's like to do it simply, it's like a Domino's franchise or a McDonald's franchise. You buy the brand. Tokyo have put billions into this to try and get their country back on certainly their economy growing. They've had natural disasters with earthquakes and even man-made disasters with the nuclear explosion at Fukushima. They are trying to put themselves back on the map. So they have invested in this brand. But as you rightly say, it's not down to them to call it off. It's the IOC's decision.
Yeah, it's clause 66 of the bid city host contract. There's a lot of clauses, but 66 is called termination, and it basically says that the IOC can withdraw the Games. Now, it did that, as we were hearing from Rob, during wartime, 1916, 1914, 1944. And what clause 66, the termination clause, says is that civil disorder or a boycott can mean cancellation of the games, or if the safety of participants is threatened for any reason whatsoever. And terminate is the phrase that they use, not reference to postponement. What is your gut feeling then? Do you feel that the games could be just cancelled completely? Or do you think that we could maybe have the games later on in the year when we've got a bit more of a handle on COVID-19?
I think at the moment there are more important things going on in the world than whether the Olympics is going to go ahead or not. And I think the government in this country is dealing what it's dealing with. Japan has just around 300 cases of coronavirus at the moment, which when you think about it, with the proximity of where it is and where the first outbreak came from China, you think they had more than 700 on the cruise ship, but for Japan on the island have had 300. They are cutting back on some of the things they're doing. The torch relay's been scaled back. We heard from Rob, March the 19th is a massive day for the Olympics with the flame being lit in Greece. Of course, remember with London when Princess Anne and David Beckham went to go and get the flames and the school children, and as we heard from Rob, that's not going to happen. So they are, as an island nation and a developed nation, they are pretty equipped to deal with these situations, and they seem to be dealing with it at the moment. But the question mark is when you've got 11,000 people coming in from all other parts of the country, of all other parts of the world, how you try and contain that. So I think, to answer your question, I don't think we need to make a decision at the moment.
No, and I think, you know, we've been taking soundings from people this week, following the coverage pretty closely. From an IOC point of view, the International Olympic Committee point of view, they dealt with Zika in the build-up to Rio. That was obviously a huge concern, a different concern, but similar.
There were no cases of Zika.
And there were no cases of Zika after the Games. And you've got to remember, in the build-up to the Winter Games in Pyeongchang, we were talking about whether there was going to be a threat of nuclear war on the peninsula of Korea at the time. That was literally the backdrop to the Winter Games in 2018. And the IOC, I think, Thomas Bach has been pretty relaxed, pretty defiant, pretty calm about the whole thing. We've been speaking to Team GB as well, and I think that's kind of what their outlook has been as well. Pretty relaxed, pretty calm, but taking it seriously. Yeah,
I mean, we may well ask the athletes that we speak to a bit later on this podcast about how they potentially deal with these things. But from my point of view, from a journalist that covers the Olympics, is there no better group of people who are fit and healthy to actually go to an event and not necessarily catch something? You know, British cycling have had rules where they don't shake hands with people and haven't forever, and they haven't done that, those marginal gains, and they haven't done that for years. So there is that argument that people are well prepared, and as you say, we've been talking to Team GB, and they're using the blueprint that they had for the Zika situation.
They've dusted off the folder, as they told us.
But it is a monitoring situation, and it may well change, and I think that's what you have to say. I go back to my point that you don't have to make the decision now. You've got to carry on business as usual, but take a proactive approach, is what Team GB are doing with the government and Public Health England. And they say, you know, there is concern, it's on the agenda, but at the moment we are carrying on with our approach. And we mentioned there were no cases of Zika. We asked Team GB how many of the 1,000 athletes and representatives and team and staff for Team GB got ill in Rio for the 3 weeks they were out there, and out of that 1,000 people, there are about a dozen people who picked up coughs and colds or whatever.
Usual sort of things when you bring 1,000 people to an area for a month. It was the usual kind of illnesses. Now, Team GB have provision in places for events like this, so they will have isolation rooms. So, for example, when you go to an event like this, if you are a member of the rowing 8, you will sleep quite communally. So you might be in 2 or 3 rooms.
Not in 4 bunk beds.
No, but in the rowing 8 and the cock, so there might be 9 of you, there might be three in a room. Now, if one member of that rowing 8 or the cocks develops a sore throat, they will have a single room, an isolation room that they can take that person to. That is pretty standard practice. The key thoughts, I think, from Team GB before we wrap up and we bring Saskia and Kirstie in and speak to our guests from British Sailing, is the event is still 5 months away. They're very keen to try and get that message out there. There's no travel bans currently in place to Japan. And if you have visited Japan, there's no requirement to self-isolate following a visit. So I think while those 3 things are still in place, I think the Games goes on.
Yeah, I'm not sure cancelling the Olympics at the moment is the biggest story on the news agenda this week. I mean, it's interesting, and I know why people are asking the questions, but let's be honest, there are more important things that people need to be thinking about short term with coronavirus.
You're listening to Anything But Footy, the Olympic and Paralympic sport podcast. The final bit of advice that Team GB gave us as far as washing your hands is concerned.
I was a bit like, I can't sing Happy Birthday twice every time I wash my hands. So I was like, well, what else is that kind of 20 seconds, 25 seconds
This is
long?
official comment, by the way, from Team GB.
And they said, I said, what about the national anthem?
Yep.
You know, let's get into the British spirit and Team GB. So, God Save the Queen. If you sing the first verse, not the second verse, no one knows the second verse. If you sing the first verse of God Save the Queen,
when you're washing your
hands, it would just bring that patriotic feeling and pre-Olympic feeling to the games.
So that's official Team GB comment.
They thought it was a good idea.
Yes, they did. They thought it was a good idea, which is the first one we've probably ever come up with. So if you are washing your hands and you want to 20 seconds, national anthem, first verse, that's what you need to do. You're listening, as I said, to Anything But Footy, the Olympic Paralympic sport podcast. We are at Superpod2020, delighted to be here. So the Olympics at the moment then is going ahead. As Thomas Bach has said this week, he wanted our athletes to prepare, as he put it, full steam. That's good news for 15 British sailors who've already been named to represent Team GB. They have their full complement. They will be picking up their kit at the NEC in Birmingham. They will be going to the games as Team GB sailors this summer in Tokyo. They are one of the first teams to confirm their lineup. In fact, they're the first full team to confirm their lineup. We have got a climber and canoeist that have also been named, but sailing is ahead of the curve.
And we're obviously delighted to be down in Southampton for this live Superpod edition of Anything But Footy. So with the waft of sea air in our nostrils, we thought it would be apt to focus a little on British sailing, a sport that's been in the Olympics since its inception, apart from 1904.
What happened then?
I'm not sure. Was it that in St Louis or somewhere?
Maybe, too far from the sea.
Yeah, and Britain leads the medals table overall for the Olympics as well. Great Britain really does rule the waves.
So, will you please welcome to our podcast windsurfer Saskia Sills and Nacra17 sailor Kirstie Urwin, who will be joining us on Anything But Footy and Superpod 2020. So, thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, Saskia, if you sit.
The chairs are really heavy.
They are really heavy.
But you're strong sailors, so you'll be fine. Thank you for coming.
No problem. Thank you for having us.
Kirstie, to start with you, as you're sitting right next to me.
Yes.
How do you become a sailor?
That's a good question. I was very lucky. I grew up just down the road from here in Lymington, on the south coast. I had parents that were into sailing and wanted to get my brother and I into the sport so that basically they could take us on nice days out. And then, unfortunately, I'm a very competitive person, so it backfired on them, and they spent most of my childhood driving me around the country to compete.
And did you play other sports while growing up, or...?
Yes, I was involved in sort of various sports with school, so netball, tennis, hockey, but sailing was always my main sport. It's a sport that I got a passion for really early on, and I built a group of friends outside of my school friends, so I had that social connection with them outside of those school hours, and so it just became really easy to spend my weekends doing that and develop and grow within the sport.
And what I'm always interested in with athletes and sailors is, when do you decide to become a professional? As in, when it becomes your job?
Well,
because it doesn't just happen, does it?
No, well,
or does it?
It's funny you say that, because I would actually say I completely fell into it. I never had any ambition to be an Olympic sailor or try to be an Olympic sailor, do this as a full-time job. I enjoyed it. I was competitive, and I liked that I could travel around the world doing it, and I was very privileged that I was able to do that at a really young age. And then I had my final year in youth. I was just very successful. Actually, that's when Sass and I first met. We were both selected to go to the Youth Worlds together, and we both won medals. And as a result of that, the British sailing team, as we transitioned out of youth into senior, invited us to come along to camps with them and see if we had potential to continue training at a higher level. And so it was never I'm going to push, I'm going to get the results to make it to that camp. It just sort of happened. But there's definitely people that do have that drive and that ambition to do that from a younger age. So I think it very much depends on the person.
And Saskia, let's bring you in. Obviously, you had tremendous success as a youth athlete in terms of winning gold medals there. When did you first pick up a windsurfing board and think, right, well, this is me, this is what I can do, I can be the best in the world at this?
So my story is quite similar to Kirstie's, really. When I was younger, my parents kind of took us along to the local kids club at our local lake, and my older brother, actually started sailing, and he would see the windsurfers going up and down the lake, going super fast.
Do you think windsurfing is a bit cooler than sailing? Was that it?
I don't know what my brother was thinking. But yeah, so he was begging my parents to allow him to try windsurfing, and they don't really have a background in sailing or windsurfing. It was just kind of a local kids club which did sailing. That's why he did it. And so one day he was finally allowed to, or the opportunity came up for him to try windsurfing, and he was just hooked straight away. He loved it. And he went on to be a very successful windsurfer as well. And I, at that age, I think it was 2005, so it must have been 7 or 8. I adored my brother. He still is my hero. He's amazing to me. And I just wanted to do everything my brother did. And so I just wanted to try windsurfing too. And I also have an identical twin sister. So it was kind of a little family thing, and we just enjoyed being out on the water together.
Kind of spur each other on.
Yeah, exactly.
So was it sort of just social and for fun initially?
Absolutely. Social to begin with, yeah. It was never kind of you're going to start sailing and then start winning and be an Olympic sailor. It was just pure fun. I remember my favourite races used to be where they would fill milk bottles full of sweets. I used to just throw them out to the sea.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it was excellent. It still is my favourite race.
Where is this exactly?
Yeah. And we all would have to go and race and kind of work out how to get to these sweet bottles, which weren't at a fixed point. So it was kind of bringing all kind of race skills and stuff into our sailing, which we didn't really realise it was doing at the time. And then, of course, at the end, the person with 10 sweet bottles actually had to share all the sweets around. So it was
that's
like
refuelling, isn't it, for you athletes? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of my fond memories, and just as a family, like being together at the weekends, kind of doing things together was really nice. And being out on the water with my twin sister Imi was like lovely, and we always kind of enjoyed training together, and always wanted to try and be like our brother and get to where Sam is. And I think just through our enjoyment is how we progressed along the circuit. We're really fortunate in the UK that we have a really great kind of backbone of racing events every month or every weekend that you can join in on if you want to. And we're also really fortunate our parents gave up their time to take us around the UK racing. So yeah, that's kind of how we got into it.
And a question then to both of you, really, and we talked about your success that you both had as youths. Was there a moment, was there a point then when you thought as a teenager, you know, I'm quite good at this, I'm a bit better than the rest of them?
I think for me, kind of just the enjoyment I get from windsurfing is kind of, it's just windsurfing that I love, and then the results come after that for me. And actually Kirstie and I had a great World Championships together in 2012, and I kind of went, it was the under-19 World Championships and I was 15, kind of went as I wasn't expected to win the trials, I wasn't expected to even do top 10 in the world, and I somehow went and won it. And I remember Kirstie and her sailing partner Annabelle on the last day went into the last day kind of, they could get third or they could drop, and it was kind of a little bit like shaky as to what would happen.
Stressful, I'd say.
Yeah, it was stressful.
I can feel that stress emanating from you now.
It was stressful. And I remember I won, I secured my gold, and I was waiting around on shore for Annabelle and Kirstie to come off, and at that point in 2012 we didn't have instant social media, so we didn't know what would happen. It was only until we saw them that we knew that what would have happened. And Kirstie and Annabelle came up the slipway, and we saw each other, and we just had this massive hug, and we were like screaming and crying because they had done it, I had done it, and I think there was 2 other medals in the team, and it was just kind of the most amazing moment to share with such good friends. And I think sport takes you to extreme places, and to have friends along the journey is so important. And so I think that moment for me was when I kind of thought, I want more of this.
Yeah. And actually, weirdly, those other medals that Sass has just been talking about, there was a gold medal that my now sailing partner won. So it's weird. We all won medals in that moment, on that day, and we've all sort of carried on this journey together. And yeah, so now I sail with Rupert as a team. So it's weird that moment maybe where we first both experienced that success and maybe understood what that could mean for the future for us. We shared that experience together.
You heard us prattle on about our love for the Olympics earlier on. I'm going to name drop here. There might be a few name drops in the next half an hour.
Clunk.
When we were talking to Max Whitlock, Britain's greatest gymnast, he basically said growing up it wasn't something that was on his radar. He didn't want to be an Olympic champion. He just kind of fell into it. He was good at gymnastics, and he's grown, and and he babyface Max came on board in London 2012, and then obviously did double gold in Rio. So is it the same for you guys? Do you have this passion for the Olympics, or is it the passion for your sport?
I think it's a passion for the sport ultimately to start with. I don't know if you've ever sailed, but sailing can be pretty brutal.
I've done it on a duck pond.
Yeah, it can be
Cross-channel ferry.
Well, it can be. It's cold. It's wet. It's pretty miserable. And so I think if you don't have that love for the sport initially, you're never going to get anywhere, because until you have really built that love for the sport, you don't appreciate how amazing it is to be out there on the water and really appreciate the amazing feeling that you get from sailing. And yeah, it would be so easy as a 7-8-year-old to just be like, this is rubbish, Mum. Yeah. Why are you making me do this? Yeah. But if you can just drive through that, you have the most amazing experiences and the opportunities, like I said earlier, to travel around the world and go to these awesome venues that you would just have no opportunity to go see if you weren't doing sport. So yeah, I don't think it's necessarily having that Olympic goal on your radar for most sailors. I think it's having that love for the sport. So then, Saskia, how important is the Olympics for sailing? Because actually, for every 4 years, you get that focus.
Yeah, the Olympics is extremely important for sailing, and I think it's extremely important that they have athletes that love the sport enough to be able to put up with some of the really horrible dark moments to be able to push themselves to get medals for sailing. We're very fortunate in the UK that we're lottery funded, our sport, so every 4 years the amount of lottery funding each sport get is determined on how many medals they win for the UK. And so really, I mean, it's unbelievably important that for sailing that the Olympics are held and that we do well there, so that we can get the funding that is good to get us to the next four
Can I ask you? You're obviously very young for London 2012. What was your first Olympic memories then, both of you?
My first Olympic memories was I think it was 2000 Olympics. I would have been 4, and I remember I remember holding myself up against my parents' bookcase watching the athletics.
Right, yeah. In Sydney.
In Sydney, yeah. And I think I was wondering as well, how did they get there? Because I couldn't understand the aeroplane. I thought they had to drill through the ground to get to Australia.
So they go literally down
under. So I would have been 4, but I remember that memory, and I remember thinking, whoa, that's cool. But that's my first Olympic memory.
That's impressive.
Gosh, how do you remember that?
Yeah.
I can see it in my head now.
I can't.
I was 24 and I can't remember the games in Sydney hardly.
This is going to sound awful, but I could not tell you my first Olympic memory per se. I just remember suddenly having an infatuation with it. Definitely when we were at the Youth Worlds, so the Olympics in 2012 were about to happen, and there was this huge hype around it, and it was amazing to be part. We weren't obviously part of Team GB, but we were part of the youth sailing team in that year, and there was so much hype around it. It was such an amazing space to be in, and to be part of that. I actually got injured just 2 weeks before that Youth Worlds, and I had to go see a physio for the team, and I got special access to the sailors village down in Weymouth, the Olympic village.
Wow.
Which was really cool. I was injured, but I was like, this is a really cool thing to have been able to do. And I just remember having my accreditation and sort of driving up to the barrier,
because there would have been the army there, and everything would have been locked down.
Yeah, everything was locked down because the games was literally about to start, and there's me in my Honda Jazz having just passed my driving test, knocking on the door of British Sailing asking to come in.
Brilliant.
I think as well the youth sailing team that we're talking about is kind of dubbed as the closest you can get to the Olympics as a youth sailor. There's a really tough selection process. There's one girl, one boy that goes from each discipline, and so I think to be in that team 2 weeks before the Olympics started and being a successful team that won the Nations Trophy at the Youth Worlds was such a big thing for the British sailing team. I think it really felt like they were thinking, okay, well, the youth team's done really well, let's see how the senior team's going to do. And I think that kind of cemented the passion towards the Olympics for me as well, being part of a successful team at such an important time.
And I think what a lot of people maybe don't realise, and we're going to speak more to you later on in the podcast, with sailing, is that you can be the second best sailor in your class in the world, but if the best sailor comes from the same country, and you think about someone like Giles Scott, who's sort of stuck, if you like, behind Ben Ainsley, having to wait his turn, you don't get to go to the games. It's to just get in the British Olympic team is an achievement in itself, isn't it?
Huge.
Yeah, it's absolutely brutal. I think it's a really hard concept for lots of people to wrap their head around. I think if you look at athletics or swimming, sort of sports like that, everyone kind of knows there's a qualifying time you have to hit, and if you hit it, you get to go to the games. But as an example, we have 2 teams who are ranked number 1 in the world currently who will not be going to the Olympic Games because they didn't win the trials. And it's absolutely brutal, and it's heartbreaking for those teams. And we work our arses off for 4 years. And to get to that point and be not ranked number 1 in the world and then not get that privilege to go to the Olympic Games, I just can't imagine how hard it is for them. But equally, we are sailing in a nation that has so much talent that those opportunities, it makes you really appreciate them when you get them. And so, as brutal as it is, you know that that's the game from day one. And you know, if you don't perform at the right moment, that is it. If you allow your teammates to beat you, unfortunately, that's the sport.
Well, it's tough, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a tough sport, but it's a great sport.
We'll talk more to you, as we said, in a little while, and we'll look forward to hopefully seeing you in Paris in 2024, and we'll talk about that journey for you in a little while. But for the moment, a round of applause again then for Saskia and Kirstie.
So you are listening to Superpod 2020, broadcasting to the world from the Social in Southampton. There are many ways to listen to us. We're live on www.superpod.co.uk. We're also available on Mixlr and TuneIn. Just search for Superpod 2020 or ask your smart speaker as well. Plus, we're also streaming live on Facebook, thanks to our friends at Sona Television.
We're raising money today for Sport Relief, and if you can spare any money, please do donate. And to donate through our Just Giving page, head to superpod.co.uk, click donate in the top corner, and every single penny that you give goes to Sport Relief, helping them to support those in need, both in the UK and the world's poorest countries. And if you're a UK taxpayer, don't forget to say yes to Gift Aid, so that the government will add an extra 25% on top of your donation with no extra cost to you. And on behalf of Anything But Footy, the Olympic and Paralympic Sport Podcast, we say thank you.
So when we were growing up, seems a long time ago now, in the 80s and 90s, the athletes' headlines in the papers and TV and radio, as Michael rightly said, they were the only ones that were reporting on these things. There was nothing else like social media or podcast. Mainly was all about racing, winning and gold medals. So many superstar names roll off the tongue. Seb Coe, Steve Cram, Linford Christie, Sally Gunnell, Tessa Sanderson, Daley Thompson. But now a week doesn't go by when athletics headlines hardly ever contain a mention of winning. Invariably, it's all around doping and cheating. So, on this part of Anything But Footy, the Olympic and Paralympic podcast, let's start with the biggest of them, Russia.
Yeah.
I bet you wondered what I was going to say there. Who's the biggest cheat?
I was rather hoping you weren't going to mention anyone by name there, so I'm glad you've just gone for an entire nation.
I've gone for an entire nation. Now, it's hard to keep up with Russia.
Yep.
It's not, frankly, but there's so many...
It is, because of all the drugs.
They have been banned from competing in international sport as a nation for the next 4 years. And not for the reason that they swapped samples through a hole in the wall at Sochi 2014, the Winter Olympics that they staged. No, that wasn't enough to get them banned from competing at the Rio 2016. They literally changed the urine samples in the bottles. The McLaren report wasn't enough for the IOC to ban them from Rio. 4 years on, they continue to be defiant and tamper with evidence that they then give to the World Anti-Doping Agency, which is WADA, which we'll describe as WADA from now on. So they declared them non-compliant for manipulating laboratory data in January 2019, banning them from all sport, major sport, over the next 4 years. But they're going to appeal it, as is their right. They will go to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. Bizarrely, they're still allowed to stage Euro 2020 football matches in St. Petersburg.
And they're getting events that are being moved from other countries because of coronavirus, which are now heading to Russia, flying in the face of all this guidance and advice and rulings.
Yeah, just this week, Taekwondo is going to have qualifying for the Olympics in Moscow, in a nation that is banned from competing in sports moving forward. Now, any athlete who can apparently prove that they are clean and not part of the government system, and they can compete as a neutral athlete. But as Team GB told us again this week when we were speaking to them, in Pyeongchang, in the Winter Olympics, the same ban applied to the Russians. There were 168 Russians taking part in the Winter Olympics, and they won 17 medals. And Team GB said, it's a Russian team in all but name. This should not happen again. They've shown no contrition or respect for the Olympic movement and its athletes. So as I say, they're appealing it. It won't be heard, the hearing, until April. It won't be heard in public, despite WADA and lots of athlete groups, including Global Athletes, saying that they want it in public so people can understand the reasons, and Russia can't come out afterwards and say, well, we're just being ganged up on by the West. It's not going to be held in public, though. It will be held behind closed doors, and we won't get a decision in May. Now, we might have a bigger decision in May that the Olympics doesn't take place in the first place, but it's wrong that 4 years on from Rio, where me and you sat in the main press centre in Rio talking about whether Russia were going to compete in the Games literally days before the Games started, 4 years on, we're still having that same argument.
And I think, for me, and this is the word I always go back to, is trust. And I think the general sporting public, who are maybe not the people who are trekking down to the Alexander Stadium or to Crystal Palace to go to the British Championships, but these people that get excited by what they're seeing once every 4 years at an Olympic Games have lost complete and utter trust in what they're watching. And this is impacting on clean athletes, because even a clean athlete that performs well, performs maybe better than they've ever performed before, which as an athlete you want to peak at the Olympic Games. That is what you've targeted your 4-year programme to do, to make sure that that night, in that final, you are as good as you possibly can be. They train for that, they do that cleanly. The person sat at home goes, well, they're on the juice.
I mean, you can tell from my passion, I hate the whole story about it, and it's a complete and utter mess. But also a mess, and is a leading British athlete,
yep,
who we have to talk about as well.
Yeah,
and that's Mo Farah.
And again, this goes back, I think, to that idea of trust. And Mo Farah has been the subject of a number of newspaper stories recently, podcast discussions like ours, a panorama program. Another panorama program. Mo Farah, 4-time Olympic champion, who's now targeting a 5th Olympic gold, has never failed a drugs test, one of the most tested athletes. He says he encourages retesting, and his samples are still held for that to potentially happen. But again, wherever Mo Farah goes, wherever Mo Farah competes, he's consistently being asked about doping, and this is because of his links to Alberto Salazar and the Nike Oregon project. So it's legitimate inquiries that Mo Farah is getting, because he was part of a programme for 6 years that it seems now is emerging that was on the edges of what is perhaps right or wrong. It's obviously its lead coach is currently serving a 4-year suspension. And then, of course, there's inconsistencies in stories subsequently. So you go back to Mo Farah competing in the London Marathon. He was spoken to by the US anti-doping authorities. They were asking him about this supplement, L-carnitine it's called. It's legal within certain doses. That's the point. Mo Farah said he never took it. Came out of the discussion, the conversation, bumped into Barry Fudge, who works for British Athletics, the head of endurance, then went back in and admitted he had taken it, but the doctor hadn't recorded the amount that he'd taken. So all these things add together and goes back to that word that I said, trust. Do people trust what they've seen Mo Farah do on the track?
And my issue again is he's never come out and criticised Salazar. So in an interview with Matt Lawton, who's not a friendly journalist, if you like, to Mo Farah,
he's not.
But he did an exclusive with Matt in the Times because they wanted to get his side of the story out there. But he admitted that he hadn't read the report on Salazar, and he's never criticised him. He eventually left him in 2017, but he still hasn't criticised him. And that is an issue for me, that it's either him or his advice that he's being given is not strong enough.
No, he doesn't seem able to get his story straight, and hasn't done for a number of years. Now, Mo Farah, I think, quickly before we move on and deal with a couple of other things on Anything But Footy, he's a medal hope. He's going for a fifth gold medal. Where else, looking ahead to Tokyo in terms of the world of track and field, do you think the medals might come from? I would suggest it's all about the girls. You've got Katarina Johnson-Thompson, world champion. You've got Dina Asher-Smith, a world champion in 200 metres, and Gemma Reekie has come onto the scene this year and looks a really good prospect.
Absolutely, and I think, KJT, as she's known, Katarina Johnson-Thompson, has a huge battle on her hands with Nafi Thiam, the current Olympic champion. She beat her in the Worlds, of course, last year, but she was injured. Thiam, she's broken the Belgium indoor long jump record this winter, so Katarina has a challenge on her hands for a gold there. So does Dasha, as we like to call her, Dina Asher-Smith. All the sprinters will be going in the 200 metres. No disrespect, and I thought she was Sports Personality of the Year last year for her 200 metre world champion win, but she wasn't up against some of the big athletes who will be competing at the Olympics. So some big question marks over there. But you mentioned Gemma Reekie, but it's all to do with her shoes, isn't it?
Well, yeah, she's wearing these new Nike Vaporfly shoes, and World Athletics, which is the new name for the governing body, they are bringing in some new rules actually next month. These new Nike Vaporfly shoes, apparently they bring you a 4 to 5% improvement. So I've done one marathon in my time, and if someone's done a marathon, they'll mention they've done a marathon, so I'm mentioning that I've done a marathon. And I did it so slowly, if I'd worn Nike Vaporflies with a 4 to 5% improvement, I'd have taken 14 minutes, 25 seconds off my time. So,
that's impressive.
All with a pair of shoes. But the serious point, the 5 fastest marathon times of all time have been done in these shoes. So the new rules are the thickness of the soles would be restricted. The shoes need to be publicly available. So you and I could go into Sports Direct and buy these and take 14 minutes off our marathon time. And the current guidelines, I think, were just not fit for purpose. They basically said shoes must not be constructed so as to give athletes any unfair assistance or advantage. What does that mean? No jetpacks? What they've done is they've tried to tighten up these legal requirements. And Gemma Reekie has had a fantastic indoor season where she broke the British 800 metres, 1500 metres and mile records all within about 2 weeks. And everyone wanted just to speak to her about her shoes.
But again, a bit like Mo Farah, the advice that she's getting is the thing that frustrates me, because we've been to these events before, Michael. We've covered these events. We've gone to pre-press conferences with Jess Ennis, she was then, and Usain Bolt and Mo Farah, and they have to front up and answer questions that journalists want answering. Now, my understanding is that she agreed to do a press conference before the Glasgow indoor, but said, I'm not going to talk about the shoes. And her coach said, if anyone asks about the shoes, we're going to walk out. We're going to walk out of the press conference. And my issue with it, look, as you rightly say, she's broken 3 British records in 3 weeks indoors. She did a brilliant performance in the 1500 metres in that indoor in Glasgow, where she came back and beat the European silver medalist, I think, on the line to win. She's obviously on great form, and it is not just about her shoes. But what she should just come out and say is, it's not just my shoes. Yes, my shoes have helped me a little bit. By not saying that they've helped her a little bit, it's making us kind of question it. While actually, she should just come out and front it up.
And she should be making the point as well that, you know, she's had issues with her health and diet. So she's discovered relatively recently that she's gluten intolerant. And we're going to bring Kirstie and Saskia back on in the next 15 minutes and talk to them about things like diet and dealing and managing those kind of situations. Gemma Reekie had a sinus operation in December as well. So you can trace a lot of this improvement back to those key improvements that she's made. But they haven't got that message across to the public, I don't think, as well as they could. Anyway, you're listening to Anything But Footy, the Olympic and Paralympic sport podcast. Time is really marching on and beginning to go against us.
As always.
And we want to speak more to Saskia and Kirstie as well. So I just want to bring up one other sport before we go back to sailing, and that's cycling, which has been part of the Olympic programme since 1896. In Beijing, London and Rio, Team GB topped the medal table as far as cycling was concerned, both Olympics and Paralympics as well. But Tokyo could see the previously imperious British cycling overtaken by their rivals. We've just recently had the track cycling world championships, and it wasn't really a weekend to write home about as far as the British team were concerned in Berlin. They won 1 gold, which is in an event, the points race, that's not in the Olympics, 2 silver medals and 1 bronze. So is it time to start lowering our expectations on what the cycling team will do?
Yeah, I mean, ever since Chris Boardman in '92, Jason Queally at Sydney in 2000, you've expected Britain to perform, certainly on the track. They haven't quite managed it on the roads, but you'd expect them to perform. And those World Championships, as you rightly say, since the worst in an Olympic year since 2000, with just 4 medals, a gold, 2 silvers and 1 bronze. Eleanor Barker in the points race. It's not an Olympic event.
No.
2 silvers in the team sprint. Jason Kenny, Jack Carlin and Ryan Owens, and the women's team pursuit. No Laura Kenny in that, but we'll talk to her about her in a minute. Nia Evans, Ellie Dickinson, Katie Archibald and Eleanor Barker. And then 1 bronze from Matt Walls in the Omnium, which is a great performance, his first senior medal. So there were lots of 4th places as well. Michael, I think we need to be careful that we don't oversell that we're not performing
I think
very well.
Traditionally, obviously, British cycling have come good at Olympics because that's the time when they brought out the cycle suits and the new bikes and the new technology. They can't do that now. They're having to ride and wear what they're going to have to ride in the Olympics. That's the rule on the World Series this year. So, they haven't got those extra marginal gains. Whether that 5 months will tell. But let me just put this point to you before we kind of move on. If the track team don't perform as well as we are used to, and remember every member of that track team won a medal in Rio, would we accept that for some medals coming in things like BMX and mountain biking, which potentially, when you look at the British cycling's remit in terms of mass participation, grassroots sport, actually more people are more likely to go mountain biking or BMXing if BMXing's a word.
And that's the thing, we spoke to Julie Harrington, who's the chief exec of British Cycling. You did, didn't you? They're based in Manchester, and she's in charge of all these different sports, basically. You've got BMX freestyle making its debut at Tokyo 2020, which is basically dancing on a bike. You're trying to impress a judge to give you a good score. And that is totally different from riding around in a circle as fast as you can and trying to beat the opposition. So you're right. I think British cycling, what they would really hope for is that they win medals across more of their events. And I would say, and Jason Kenny said it, that we always come good. Katie Archibald has said it this week before competing in Manchester this weekend in the 6-day event, is, we may be going through some really heavy training at the moment. So that's not necessarily, our performance at the Worlds isn't what it might be in the Olympics, while other countries may have targeted the Worlds ahead of the Olympics. So I think we need to be careful not to write them off too early. And Laura Kenny in particular, she is a superstar. I mean, to get up from, she's done a shoulder in, she needed surgery, then to go to the Worlds and fall off and still compete in the Omnium and finish 4th as well. She's done an incredible job, and she will win at least 1, probably 3 gold medals at the Olympics. And she came off, and Katie Archibald said this, she came off Laura Kenny and said, despite everything that went wrong in Berlin, I can still win the Olympics. And that is the kind of spirit that is at British cycling.
And some of those other names maybe to mention: Kai White in BMX, Kyle Evans, Bess Shriver as well, Annie Last in the mountain biking. Great Britain won a gold and a silver medal in the last mountain bike world championship, so there could be medals coming that way. We're Anything But Footy, the Olympic and Paralympic sport podcast, and as mentioned, we're in Southampton, the home of British sailing, and still with us we have Saskia Sills and Kirstie Urwin, who we will bring back up in a moment and speak to them about their hopes as we begin to move forward now into, well, we've got obviously the Tokyo Olympics, which is just round the corner, and then Paris 2024, and it will come around very quickly, won't it?
Yeah, no, it certainly will. And we've been talking to the performance director, Ian Walker, this year, who told us that they're going to win at least 5 medals in Tokyo on a good day. I mean, we said Kirstie and Saskia are not part of this team at the moment. We'll talk about why maybe in a moment. But do you think that's a reasonable target? What do the team think? What are your
no
friends?
pressure.
Well, give us some gossip. What are your teammates saying?
I think that the team wouldn't select anyone that they don't think has medal potential, and if you look at any of the teams that have been selected, or the individuals that have been selected, everyone has medalled in the last year. I think that's fair to say. So I don't think it's unfair to say that we could win those 5 medals, but also sailing is a very unpredictable sport. There's a lot of uncontrollables within that, and we spend our entire life trying to control those controllables so that the uncontrollables are less, affect our performance less, but you just don't know what's going to happen on the day. So you just said that cycling at the last games, every athlete in that team won a medal. Like the party that British sailing would have, if that happened, like be out of this world, like for that to happen. But I think you look at any other Olympic sport, for us being asked to win 5 medals, the UK sport are asking us to win 50% of the medals on offer. So it's a big ask, but we're definitely capable of it.
Now, John and I absolutely adore sailing, and there's one reason why we spent a lot of time going sailing at Rio at the Olympics, and that was the bus, because as you'll obviously realise when you're covering as journalists events like the Olympics, where you've basically got 30 simultaneous world championships taking place in one city at any one time, it's quite hard work, and there's not a lot of opportunity to sleep. But the sailing venue was about an hour out of the city, and they put the best bus on, and it was where I had all my best sleep. Horizontal seats, so absolutely fantastic. But it's Enoshima Waters coming up this time. 15 sailors selected, and I was interested about the way you were talking earlier about how you support each other, because I always thought it was quite an individual, maybe I know you're a pair, so you work as a team, but on the whole it's individual, selfish. But is there that real team feeling around British sailing? Yeah,
definitely. I think our sport is so kind of different to anything else really, that we all kind of have to have each other's back. I mean, we're away from home for a long periods of time. We are not near our friends and family, so we really have to try and find key relationships in our team to keep us going when we're away from home or stuff's going wrong. And like I said, sailing has extreme highs, elite sport has extreme highs, but also extreme lows. And so you really have to kind of pick your teammates, or not pick your teammates, but you have to kind of all be there together for each other, and then have some really key relationships in the team that will have your back when you need, and you'll have their back. And definitely Kirstie and I's relationship is one of those for me, and it's a really, really important part of our sport.
So we've got about 5 minutes remaining. Where are you as far as Paris 2024? How in your thoughts is that at the minute?
It's weird. It's we're 5 years away from that still, 4.5 years, and it's already at the forefront of all the plans that I'm making, and the same for Sass. Unfortunately, me and my teammate have had a really tough year. Back in June last year, we were at a World Cup, and I fell out the boat in a crash and broke my thumb, and then had 3 months
quite
recovery.
Crucial when you're sailing.
You need a thumb. What's funny though, in the moment, it's fair to say he's a little bit pissed off at me. So he obviously was carried on sailing away from me, so he had to come back and pick me up. And at the point that he picked me back up, we're still mid-race, and I sort of said, "Oh, my thumb really hurts here. I think I might have broken it. And he just said, well, you've got another hand, pull the kite up.
Exactly like that?
That tone and everything, yeah, you can imagine it.
Fortunately, you're friends, as you mentioned.
Yes, yeah, fortunately we were able to move past that. But so I had 3 months recovering from that, and then we got back in the boat, and 2 weeks later he ruptured his ACL and tore his meniscus.
Well, there's karma.
Yeah. Yeah, and so we've had a really tough year, but what we're trying to do right now is get ourselves into the best possible place as a team that we can hit the ground running for the next cycle, and just be a really strong team for that cycle.
Same for you, Saskia?
Yeah, so I've had a bit of an up and down year as well. Actually, last June, the same competition Kirstie's talking about, I won my first ever senior medal in the Paris 2020.
Talked about it in the podcast.
Yeah, in the Paris 2024 venue. So that was a huge thing for me.
Marseille.
Yeah, in Marseille.
Yeah.
And so I have really great memories connected to that place now, and it's kind of made me more confident that I can look towards Paris 2024 with a positive mind, and really kind of take hold of this campaign and for it to be mine, and to make sure that I'm there. I'm in a really fortunate place that I'm training partner for the Enoshima candidate, Tokyo 2020 candidate, Emma, and so I get to kind of see the ins and outs of how the Olympic build-up is and stuff, and hopefully next time I'll be there.
So you've got Emma Wilson and Tom Squires who are going to Tokyo. Medal chances for those guys?
Yeah, both. I back both of them for medals. Like Kirstie said, the British sailing team wouldn't select anyone that they don't believe can win a medal, and on both of their days they're both world class. So yeah, I absolutely believe we can get 2 medals in RSX.
And you mentioned Marseille.
Yeah.
Because the surfing for Paris is going to be in Tahiti.
Yeah.
You want to change sport?
Bizarre. I like windsurfing.
I like the idea of reporting on surfing in Tahiti.
We're better than the sailing bus in Rio.
Yeah, fantastic. And obviously, in terms of the names that we will know for Tokyo, Giles Scott, obviously the reigning champion, Hannah Mills, and I know Ailey McIntyre, who's now partnering with Hannah, is going to be on another podcast later. But that experience, I guess, for them and for Hannah, and it's a third Olympics because she won in London as well. Will that help? Do you, as the other members of the team, will that permeate through to you? Were you able to lean on that kind of experience down the line?
I definitely think so. The British sailing team is really privileged that we have athletes that are really experienced. I think in other sports you get athletes moving through the sport a lot quicker. So swimming is an example of that, where actually sort of that retirement age is a lot lower. So we're really lucky to be able to lean on that experience and learn from those athletes, and maybe the mistakes they've made and try not to make them, maybe, or ask for a bit of advice on maybe a situation that you haven't had before and you haven't experienced before. And I think those experienced athletes within the Olympic team are really, really crucial to helping maybe the new athletes that haven't been to the Olympics before navigate that environment a bit more successfully.
Well, Kirstie and Saskia, thank you so much for joining us at Superpod. We wish the whole British sailing team huge luck. Pass that on to them, won't you, for Tokyo? And we will follow you two very, very closely, of course, ahead of Paris 2024. So all the very best for that.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been great to be part of Superpod 2020. Superpod has been made possible thanks to our sponsor Debonair Images, commercial, portrait, product and wedding photographers, as well as sponsoring the event and also donating 20% of all work undertaken or booked from now until the end of March.
You can check them out on their website, debonairimages.com. You can find them on Instagram as well. Now, we are Anything But Footy. Thank you very much for having us, your Olympic and Paralympic sport podcast, and we're going to wrap up now, of course, just by linking into a video that they're playing as part of Superpod 2020. We're here, as we said, this weekend, raising money for Sport Relief, who help disadvantaged people all over the UK and beyond. So let's take a look at one of the many ways that your money helps people right here in the UK. Thank you.
Ever since I went down my first jump, I felt a lot more confident and braver, and that I could achieve so much more. It made me feel a lot better about myself. Skateboarding makes me really happy, and then when I'm happy, I get less and less nervous. When I'm at the top of a big ramp, I feel a bit scared. Sometimes but I just do it. At school, I used to be really shy. I was really bad at making friends, and I used to let people pick on me. It made me feel really sad and really small because I didn't have the voice to tell them that they were wrong. When I moved school, and some of the people there, they were a bit mean, and they called me names because I was new, and I felt really lonely. Sometimes I feel sad when I fall out with my friends.
Growing up can be tough, but in Manchester, there's a safe place these girls can always go to be themselves, make friends, and learn new skills.
First came to the skate park, didn't think I'd be able to do it. I was close to quitting. They always try and make you do something new. If I do something scary and I complete it, I feel really proud and really happy. I felt like I could be who I am, and I started to not let people walk over me all the time. This is my favourite move, and it's called a rock fakie. I like it when it's girls' night at projects because it's a really easy place to make friends. This is my favourite move, and it's called a kick turn. It's really, really fun, and you learn new tricks, and I see all my friends.
Sport Relief supports projects like this one all over the UK that use sport to give people a confidence boost. Get involved through your school this year, and you can help change lives.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
It is Ryan here, and I have a question for you. What do you do when you win? Like, are you a fist pumper, a woohooer, a hand clapper, a high fiver? I kind of like the high five, but if you want to hone in on those winning moves, check out Chumba Casino. At ChumbaCasino.com, choose from hundreds of social casino-style games for your chance to redeem serious cash prizes. There are new game releases weekly, plus free daily bonuses. So don't wait. Start having the most fun ever at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.